I was leaning back in my leather chair, the New York skyline stretching out in front of me like a canvas of ambition. The late afternoon sun hit the glass of my office, casting golden streaks across my walnut desk. My silk blouse clung lightly to my shoulders, the kind you wear when you know you're going to be seen. I had just signed off on a deal that would push our quarterly revenue past the mark I'd been chasing for months when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another congratulatory message from my team. But when I saw the name on the screen, my hand froze midair. Ethan Carter. My cousin. The same Ethan who, years ago, had laughed so hard at my startup pitch that he nearly spilled his drink. The same one who told anyone who would listen that I'd probably be back living with my parents in 6 months. I pressed my lips together, the memory flashing sharp and bright, as if it had happened yesterday. The text was short. Can we meet? It's important. I could already guess why. His market had been crumbling for months, and the whispers in our industry told me he was desperate. The irony? He didn't know I was the one holding most of the cards now. I swirled the last sip of my espresso, watching the crema cling to the edges. Sure, Ethan, I muttered under my breath. Let's talk. 4 years ago, I wasn't sitting in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. I was standing in my aunt's backyard in Hartford, Connecticut, clutching a plastic cup of lukewarm lemonade, pretending my hands weren't shaking. It was the 4th of July barbecue, and the Carter family had gathered in full force. Loud laughter, the smell of charred burgers, kids chasing each other with sparklers. I had just graduated from college, and for the first time, I felt ready to share my dream with the people who claimed to love me most. Ethan was leaning against the deck railing, surrounded by a small crowd, mostly our uncles and his business friends. His voice carried that smug confidence he'd perfected since high school. So, what's next for you, Ava? He asked, sipping his beer like it was part of the performance. I took a deep breath. I'm starting my own online marketplace. A platform for independent artisans, handmade, ethical products, all in one curated space. Think Etsy, but with a... Before I could finish, Ethan snorted. Oh, so like Etsy but smaller? And run by someone who's never run a business. The laughter from his friends cut through me like thin glass. My chest tightened, and I felt my cheeks burn. I wanted to defend myself, to explain the hours I'd already poured into research, the small but promising beta I'd built. But every time I opened my mouth, he threw another jab. Better have a backup plan, he said, tossing his empty bottle in the recycling bin. You know how it is, some people just aren't cut out for the real market. I forced a smile, but my fingers dug into the cup until it crumpled in my hand. That was the moment I realized I wasn't going to convince them with words. I'd have to show them with results. Later that night, as fireworks lit up the humid July sky, I sat on the porch swing beside my grandmother, Eleanor. She slipped her hand into mine and said quietly, "Darling, remember, people who laugh at your dreams are usually afraid of their own." She pressed a small, gold compass into my palm. For when you feel lost, don't let his voice be the one you follow. I didn't know it then, but that compass would sit on every desk I ever worked at, a silent promise that I would never let Ethan be right about me. The Monday after that barbecue, I packed my old Honda Civic with a refurbished laptop, a box of thrift store office supplies, and the stubborn fire that had been lit in me the moment Ethan laughed. I rented a tiny, drafty studio in New Haven, the kind of place where the radiator groaned all night and the kitchen sink doubled as a dish rack and storage space. My desk was a wobbly table shoved against the only window, but it was my headquarters. I named the platform Aurora Lane, a nod to the idea of new beginnings. I taught myself web design from YouTube tutorials, studied supply chain logistics at 2 a.m, and cold emailed hundreds of artisans I found on Instagram and small-town craft fairs. Some nights, my eyes burned so much from staring at code that I had to close them for a few minutes and just listen to the hum of the city outside. Other nights, the doubt was so loud in my head that I had to play my grandmother's favorite jazz records to drown it out. My first artisan seller was a woman in Vermont who made hand-woven scarves. She shipped me her first box of products with a handwritten note. "I've been waiting for something like this." That one order, a $45 sale, felt bigger than any paycheck I'd ever earned. But I knew better than to broadcast my progress. Family dinners were minefields. I'd stick to vague answers like, "I'm doing some freelance work," or "still figuring things out." The fewer questions, the better. The breakthrough came when I met Marissa Blake at a local entrepreneur networking night. She was in her early 50s, sharp as a blade, and ran a boutique PR firm. After hearing my pitch, she leaned in and said, "You've got something. I can help you sharpen it, but you'll have to work harder than you ever thought possible." Under her mentorship, Aurora Lane evolved from a clunky side project into a polished brand. We streamlined onboarding for artisans, introduced a subscription model for premium features, and partnered with eco-friendly shipping companies. By the end of year 2, we had over 1,000 sellers, monthly traffic in the six figures, and a quiet but growing influence in the handmade goods sector. I still kept my profile low, no flashy social media posts, no bragging at family gatherings. Meanwhile, I heard Ethan was expanding his chain of discount home goods stores. He was loud about his success, splashing his name across billboards and sponsoring local events. What he didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that Aurora Lane's curated line of home decor had begun eating into his market share. Quietly, strategically. By the time we closed our first major wholesale contract with a national retailer, I had enough revenue to move into a Manhattan office. The compass from my grandmother sat in the center of my desk, its gold edges catching the morning light. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building an empire, and Ethan was walking straight into my territory. 2 weeks after his text, Ethan walked into my Manhattan office. He didn't recognize the name Aurora Lane Holdings etched in brushed steel on the glass door. I deliberately kept my name off the front-facing brand. When the receptionist offered him coffee, he looked around like he was trying to memorize every expensive detail for later gossip. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city sprawling beneath us in a blur of motion and light. I dressed deliberately, navy sheath dress, gold cuff bracelet, hair pinned into a sleek twist. Professional, but with an edge. "Ethan," I said, turning slowly. "It's been a while." He looked older than I remembered. Lines around his eyes, a stiffness in his shoulders. Still, his voice tried for casual confidence. "Yeah, it has. You look different." I gestured for him to sit. "You said it was important." He shifted uncomfortably. "You've probably heard. Carter Home Goods has been struggling. The market's changing. These online artisan brands are eating into our sales. Customers want authenticity, story-driven products. We can't compete on that." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, the irony was almost too rich to taste. "So," he continued, "I'm looking for a partnership. I've been told you're connected in that space. Maybe you could put me in touch with someone at Aurora Lane." I folded my hands on the desk. "Someone?" "Yeah," he said. "Whoever runs it. I can't find much about them online, but they're killing it. Their home decor line is hitting all my target demographics." I let the silence stretch. The hum of the city outside seemed louder than his breathing. Finally, I stood and walked to the sideboard where a single object sat under the warm light, my grandmother's gold compass. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm. "You remember Grandma Eleanor's compass?" I asked. His eyes flicked to it, confused. "Sure, she gave you that, right?" I nodded. "She told me never to follow your voice." He frowned. "What?" I set the compass on the desk between us, then slid a sleek, leather-bound portfolio across to him. On the cover, in embossed gold letters, was my name, Ava Carter, founder and CEO, Aurora Lane Holdings. It was like watching a glass of red wine tip over in slow motion. His face drained of color, his mouth opening slightly before he caught himself. "You," he said, barely above a whisper.
"Me."
I sat back down, my tone even. "The artisan marketplace you mocked at that barbecue? The one you said would last 6 months? It's the same company that's been taking your market share for the last 2 years." He blinked, staring at me like I'd rewritten history right in front of him. "You could have told me." I tilted my head.
"Why?"
"So you could laugh again? So you could warn me I wasn't cut out for the real market?" The weight of the moment pressed in from all sides. He looked around the office, the abstract paintings on the wall, the shelves lined with awards, the glass awards from national retailers, and I knew he was doing the math. "You've built an empire," he said finally. "I have," I replied, my voice steady. "And you walked right into it." For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan didn't have a comeback. Just silence. I leaned forward, letting my words land. "Now, tell me exactly why you're here, Ethan. And choose your words carefully. Because in this market, I'm the one who sets the terms." Ethan cleared his throat. "I need an alliance. A product partnership. If Carter Home Goods can feature your artisan lines, maybe we can revive sales. Keep our stores open." There it was, not just desperation, but the quiet fear of losing everything he'd built. I leaned back, crossing my legs. "An alliance isn't out of the question," I said slowly. "But it won't look anything like you're imagining." His brows knit. "Meaning?" "Meaning," I said, "if we work together, it will be under my branding. Aurora Lane products will take prime placement. Your store signage will shift to highlight artisans and their stories. And you'll remove every piece of mass-produced knockoff decor you've been selling." He blinked. "That's the lot." "It's non-negotiable," I replied, my tone even. "And there's more. You'll pay fair trade prices to suppliers. You'll implement eco-friendly packaging across all locations within 12 months. And you, Ethan, will take a public stance on supporting small businesses. A real one, not just a PR line." He stared at me like I'd just told him to tear down his entire business model, and in a way, I had. "I can't just—" "You can," I interrupted, "if you want to survive. This isn't about saving your old business. It's about transforming it into something worth saving." The old Ethan, the one from that backyard barbecue, would have rolled his eyes, made a joke, maybe even walked out. But the man sitting across from me now stayed quiet, processing. "And one more thing," I added, leaning forward. "This partnership isn't a lifeline. It's a probation period. You'll follow the terms exactly. If you don't, I pull out without warning, and your competitors, the ones already circling, will finish what I started." His jaw tightened, but there was no anger in his eyes this time. Just resignation. And maybe respect. "You've changed," he said quietly. I smiled faintly. "I had to. You helped with that." He exhaled, shoulders sinking. "All right. I'll agree to your terms." I reached into my desk drawer, pulling out a crisp partnership contract I'd had ready since the moment I read his text. "Good," I said, sliding it toward him. "Then we'll get to work." As he signed, I caught sight of the compass glinting in the afternoon light. A reminder of where I started and how far I'd come. When he left, the city felt quieter, like the noise of the past had finally faded. 3 months later, I visited one of Ethan's flagship stores in Hartford. The change was immediate. Gone were the shelves stacked with bland, factory-made decor. In their place were displays of hand-carved wooden bowls from Oregon, hand-painted ceramic mugs from New Mexico, and woven blankets from indigenous artisans in Montana. Each piece had a story card, a photo of the maker, a paragraph about their craft. I caught sight of Ethan near the front, talking to a customer. He was different, listening more than speaking, actually explaining the origins of a product instead of just its price. When he noticed me, he smiled, not the smug grin from years ago, but something warmer, lighter. "You were right," he said quietly when we stepped aside. "About all of it. The products, the branding, even me." I studied him for a moment, measuring the truth in his voice. "This isn't about being right, Ethan. It's about doing right by the people who create and the people who buy." He nodded, glancing at the compass pin I'd fastened to my blazer that morning. "Grandma would have been proud," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but she'd also remind us to keep moving forward." As I left the store, the air outside felt crisp, clean, like the first breath after a long winter. My driver opened the car door, but I paused, taking in the sight of a young woman walking in, her arms full of handmade pottery. Maybe she was just stocking shelves. Maybe she was starting her own dream. Either way, she was stepping into a space that existed because I refused to quit. Back in my office, I set the compass in its usual spot and opened my laptop. Sales reports, partnership updates, new artisan applications, the empire kept growing. But in the quiet between clicks, I thought about that girl in the store and all the others like her. Ethan had begun his own transformation, and maybe our relationship would never go back to what it was. That was fine. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt exactly as before. Sometimes they're reconstructed stronger, with a better view. I leaned back, letting the late afternoon sun warm my face. My journey had been built on countless nights of doubt, grit, and stubborn belief, and it was still unfolding. In the voiceover of my life, this was the line I'd leave behind. If they ever laugh at your dream, don't waste breath defending it. Just build it so big, they have to walk through your doors to survive.